Gonna have the echo the whole time. All right, let's go ahead and call F&A committee together. If city clerk will take note of attendance, we will proceed on with agenda approval. Are there any alterations or revisions requested of the agenda? Hearing none, unless there are objections, we'll move forward with the agenda as presented. With that, we'll move into public comments. Are there any members of the public currently in here wishing to make comment before the committee? And Drew standing up.
Oh, no.
No, but good point. I mean, council members and staff are public, so if you choose to talk, go for it.
That's me.
All right, with that, let's move on to agenda item 1, approval of the minutes dated May 21, 2024. Any comments, revisions, or clarifications?
I do not have any.
Chair has none.
Yeah,
Councilman
yeah,
Johnson, you okay? All right. Any objections to accepting them as presented? All right, with that, we'll take the minutes as presented as accepted. All right. Let's move on to agenda item number 2, consideration of claims report dated June 10th, 2024. Just preparatory to this, chair has no questions, but chair also has no email traffic of questions regarding the claims report prior to this meeting, at least that I'm aware of. Any other questions or clarifications? Any objections to accepting the claims report as presented? All right, we will accept the claims report as presented. Now, if I can just get back to the page 1. All right. All right, with that, we'll move on to Agenda Bill AB 24074, resolution updating the financial management policy. You want to talk this one, Drew?
Yeah. So good evening, council. Thank you for having me here today. What we are presenting as a part of the packet is our final proposed draft regarding the financial management policies and how the administration would like to update those. As we've kind of discussed, the goal is to really kind of clean up and clarify the financial management policy to make sure that it's working for us and or reflecting our current circumstances. It also provides a good reminder for everyone of what the financial management policy states. And if we really do need to engage in a longer cleanup effort, it should really take place in the off budget year. So this is really designed to kind of give us the clarity that we need to move forward in this kind of budget development phase overall. So that we have the information that we need in order to really construct a good budget for council to bring forward. Just to go kind of quickly through what we've discussed and what we've updated. 2.0 reserves and fund balance. That's a section of the financial management policy. What we've done is we've added fund type definitions as established by the budgeting, accounting, and reporting system, BARS manual of the Washington State Auditor's Office. We've also established or have been revising reserve level targets for each of the fund types if they're necessary. And then lastly, as a part of this section, we've been clarifying the use of excess fund balances above the reserve level target as well. Just to kind of, for everyone's recall overall, we have a current policy or reserve target for a number of different fund types here. And as you can see in the right-hand column is our recommended policy. That's a part of the financial management proposal that you have in front of you. This is a question that's been brought up before, and I just want to kind of quickly touch on that itself. This is the data that the committee has been requesting overall regarding the different funds, how much we've generated or have in fund balance at the end of 2023, what the reserve target would have been for 2023 if we use the assumptions that we've incorporated or the reserve targets that we've incorporated into the recommended policy, and what the difference would be between that reserve target and the 2023 ending fund balance. Most of the funds except for one would be over the reserve target. The only one that is not is currently the North Bend Police Services Fund. In addition to that, we would note attention to the enterprise funds overall. There's more than just kind of one reserve target in play when it comes to the enterprise funds. And so at the bottom there, I've also included the enterprise debt coverage ratio as well. And as you can tell in the box in green, We've got a debt coverage ratio of roughly 2.87. Net revenues to debt service overall, which is currently above our 1.5 net revenues in total. So if you were to put all this in practice, generally overall, what you can see there in the third column is, well, really the second column is what we would be reserving. And then indeed, a lot of our fund balances across multiple funds are over that target as we speak, with the revenue target assumptions that we want to incorporate into the policy itself. I'll just stop for a moment because I know it's hard to read. Some intense faces. Finished, go ahead and look up at me.
You ready for questions?
Certainly, if you want to shoot on this one.
Okay. The ARPA COVID Local Recovery Fund,
Yes.
why have a reserve on that?
So we don't actually necessarily need a reserve on that. And so what we've done as a part of the financial management policy in front of you is it's not a should. We've actually replaced the word should with may during the last session that we had with F&A committee. So we want to be, we don't necessarily need to have a reserve when it comes to our ARPA COVID Local Recovery Fund, but we did make that optional overall within our governmental operating special revenue funds if we have to accomplish that. Here, I'm just being the most restrictive in terms of showing.
Okay, I just rather get that money out than hold on to any of it.
Right. We would agree with that, but just wanted to show the most restrictive reserve classification if we wanted to do that.
Okay, but now I don't know what to do with the chart. Because you just made it a coulda, woulda, shoulda. Are these the reserve levels as proposed?
So certainly for the majority of the funds, yes, but there are certain categories such as other managerial funds or special revenue funds where it would be up to the administration's discretion to determine whether we should be setting aside a reserve level or not.
Okay, I move to take out the ARPA COVID Local Recovery Fund reserve.
Second.
You have any objection? Okay, so you have a committee recommendation to take that out. Okay. 310. Yeah, we got an ending funding balance of $23 million. Okay, there needs to be some distinction between ending fund balance and reserve. We don't have an excess of 23.05 yada yada money. That 23 million, for the most part, is spoken for. Correct? through our CIP plan and everything.
Well, so we certainly have budgeted, right? For that money. And in fact, we're going through a process of budgeting for that again at this point and modifying the CIP for this next 2-year cycle.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But it is not appropriated, which I believe is why it would be there. If it had been appropriated, then, or no, if it had been spent, there we go,
It's
then it would have gone
appropriated
away.
within the 2-year budget. So when you start looking at outside of that 2-year period, it's just planned,
Mhm.
but not necessarily appropriated. And appropriation gives you the legal authority to actually go spend those dollars.
Right, so that does not have that second part, the authority to go spend it.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
worried of the optics of somebody's gonna look at this and say, oh, you've got a $23 million reserve in non-capital funding, and that's not the case. We have a reserve of 147,000. We have a current ending fund balance of 2302, but that's in support of our CIP plan.
That's in support of our CIP plan,
Yeah.
correct?
Councilman Johnson?
So then that does bring up a question though about the reserve target for the non-utility capital fund. If we have some critical pieces of equipment that breaks down that costs $1 million, that reserve wouldn't be able to cover that. So is there something else that's supposed to be the rainy day fund that would cover that sort of thing? Or should we be looking at having somewhere in that, maybe not 23 million, but
So I think that's a valuable consideration. 1.5 total annual debt service right now, $147,000 because we're paying about $87,000 per year on the 2021 refunded bond. So I think a larger effort, cleanup effort to actually do a reserve study could be potentially beneficial in the future because you're assessing for your infrastructure risk. Right, and how much that might eventually cost the city. That's an expected value calculation that may take some time in order to actually achieve that, but it is potentially valuable. If you're to look at the current CIP and what we've produced, the lowest dollar amount that you're to see in the ending fund balance is roughly about $1.5 million, which is there equal to 1.5 times the total annual debt service that we're proposing as a part of the CIP. So you might see that cushion increase or that reserve level ideally increase depending on what council decides regarding the CIP moving forward. So
Although at this stage, the CIP is almost operations versus project. That being it's an ongoing living thing. So if we were to get, I don't know, the wall fell in on one of our tanks at the waste treatment plant, we had to fix it. We would reprioritize the CIP plan to bring it. I know, bad idea. No, we would reprioritize the CIP plan to bring that in and move other things out in the plan. So I don't know. One, I don't know that I would handle that by contingency at this level. I'd rather have that money out and moving. Two, a lot of the projects already have contingency in them. So you're getting a compound of contingency and reserve at locking this money up. So I'd rather manage it at the project level with their contingency and work the prioritization of the CIP if we have any issues, then hold a reserve at this level.
makes sense.
I see-
Insurance plays a role in this too. If a wall falls in, we would be getting some insurance to offset that cost. So really, we only need to cover the deductible. So when you said a piece of equipment failing, probably not so much. It's more like if a bridge failed.
Right.
I don't know that we have insurance for
Yeah.
the bridges.
Better example.
I think
Thanks.
just to call upon your point that you just made there. I'm not sure if everyone necessarily was here during that time, but Canyon Springs, for example, we had to restabilize the bank of that. It required actually finding room or capacity within the
Right.
CIP to actually make that happen. So there is certainly a reprioritization effort that we have gone through in the past that we can certainly do so again in regards to the CIP if those things do eventuate.
Other questions or?
I think so.
Councilman Johnson?
I think you just said it and I missed it. As compared to the utilities capital fund, why doesn't that one have a reserve again?
So the utilities capital fund doesn't have a reserve because the bonds covenants don't require a reserve. So we have 3 bonds that are paid for out of that: the 2017 refunded revenue bond, the 2018 revenue bond, and the 2021 refunded LTGO bond. 2 of those are bank placed, and so therefore they don't require a reserve. And plus the third one is the 2018 revenue bond, in which we purchased insurance, basically qualified insurance in case we're going to miss a payment or something like that. They would step up and help us pay that. So in essence, none of the bond covenants require a reserve, which is why you see it there at 0. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So other sections of the financial management policy, 3.0 revenues. Our intention is to clarify the city's objective when utility rates from one customer class subsidize the utility rates from another customer class. Often we're coming to you and developing a plan about how we're going to achieve that over time. That it's not just one fell swoop, that we're trying to make sure that no one is subsidizing the other classes and so on. In addition to that, section 5.0 for the budget, we were clarifying the level at which the council may appropriate funds, adding a section that allows the administration, as well as adding a section that allows the administration to make personnel adjustments within the limits of appropriation authority when they do not increase the city's ongoing expenditures relative to ongoing revenues or change service levels. So that would give us the ability as departments within the city to modify our current organizational chart for the most part, to be able to better deliver service to really our citizens around here. And we want to be able to make those adjustments internally without necessarily having to spend and quickly without necessarily having to have council seeking approval for those changes.
So when we get into biennial budget time, I'm just curious how this comes to concrete. Excuse the pun. We typically would show, here's the organizational structure. And it's this many heads, and then it'll be this much budget. Are you still intending to show at least the org structure to start with?
Yeah.
As the assumption to budget? It's just that if you decide to move staff between utilities and parks,
And as long as it's cost neutral, so I can't move staff between parks and utilities.
Yeah, that would
because they're
cross
different
funds.
restricted fundings, but yeah, generally, we want to be able to show you that org chart, right, of what was and what we're proposing moving forward, but we want to make sure that whatever we're doing internally is cost neutral, so that we're not coming to you saying, hey, by the way, we increased, our FT count by 5, and we're going to find a way to pay for that over time. That's not something that this really asks for. It just asks for the ability, if we can find a way to make it happen, and if it is cost neutral and it doesn't change the service level, can we modify my department, for example, in order to better deliver the service and really complete and the expectations that council and the administration has for us overall. So just gives us that little bit additional kind of room to maneuver, to be able to make those changes more quickly so that we can complete what we need to do in a timely manner.
cost neutral or cost negative.
So
It's not just cost neutral, because that's a really thin.
yes.
It's cost neutral, cost negative. I'm just.
we always advocate for
Councilman
that, so.
Johnson.
And I would assume that this would all follow whatever kinds of contracts are in place with the various unions.
It would, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you ever-
Yeah, just kind of a nitpicky. So do you want to say or change service levels, or do you want to say or negatively impact service levels? So if you are switching people over, then in order to
Okay.
provide better levels of service, then you would be affecting existing service levels, presumably, right?
We can make that update, yeah. Mike, did you have your?
So the hope for this is to help us be a little more creative in filling some of the vacancies that we can't necessarily find the talent for at that level, or or give us the opportunity to develop in-house staff, room there. So those are the real world examples of how this would apply. And it gives us that flexibility to do that.
All right, and so the last slide here, 6.0 capital budget. The intent of this financial management policy is to revise the definitions of capital outlay, capital program, capital projects, so that it's just a bit more precise in terms of terminology. Also, the proposed financial management policy establishes the appropriation level for the capital budget at the program or project level, which will allow the cities to establish a continuing appropriations budget for capital programs and projects. So I've been through an example of what that kind of looks like when you're looking at your agenda bills, and I think we're excited to move in that direction just because we want to ideally make it more simple for council to understand and for really the public to understand. In addition to that, 7.0 debt management, clarifying that revenue sources independent of the general fund can support councilmanic limited tax, general obligation bonds such as the real estate excise tax, and then 9.0 long-term financial planning, noting that the city maintains multiple long-term financial models, not just one. And so really those are just the big kind of objectives, I think, or accomplishments ideally with this revised update to the financial management policy. And I guess with that said, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions or clarifications? Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
Still just that issue talked about before of if we appropriate funds at the program or project level, that we would get some sort of updates periodically, which I still don't think has the exact numbers of when, like, is it quarterly or every 6 months or whatever it's going to be. I'm not sure that needs to happen before we approve this or not, but it should be something that gets ironed out. Just to make sure that there is some expectation from council of when it's going to happen.
And I said before, the last time we discussed this, it would be my hope that we can develop some sort of a standardized CIP progress report that goes in your monthly reports from the Public Works Department so that you would see it monthly.
Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, so then I wonder if we could just have a line that I don't think exists currently that just says with council being updated at regular intervals, then keep it a little bit vague such that we aren't trying to lock in the administration to it has to be this month or else we're violating our financial policies or something like that. But that we would have the expectation that the administration would come up with a specific plan that we could have some expectation.
How about no less than quarterly?
I could accept that if administration does.
That's fine. Sure.
Sorry, I like numbers. Periodically, just to give me a number. Okay. Will you take that under advisement?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty then, where are we? All right, so we'll move that one forward to council. And we'll move on to discussion. So item number 4, deliberation review of the mayor's proposed 2025-2030 CIP non-utilities. Go ahead.
Good evening, council. I am gonna say the same thing I said at the Parks Public Works Committee, which is that where we are this evening is to leave space for questions, deliberation, and thought from council to staff and all the members who've been working on the CIP update so far. Where we have left off most recently was through the previous Parks and Public Works Committee, FNA, and then the following council meeting was a review of what items are in the CIP, looking a lot into the community center, how the community center is funded, how the CIP is funded, and we also heard from our financial advisor on how bonds would impact the city the rates, how they're calculated, and some long-range considerations that were all given to us through a presentation at that previous council committee. The follow-up to that is that we are here now to do deliberation. We also have the next planned cycle of FNA to council, which we are currently looking at being the finals as we have it on our schedule. Included in that is also a CIP open house, which will be held this Thursday at 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in this room. And then there will be a CIP tour for council members. And that will be at 9 o'clock to noon on Saturday, this upcoming Saturday. And that will meet here at 9 o'clock, or touch early if we want to make sure we can get to all places. And then that will be a
Have
tour.
donuts.
Yeah, yeah, on time, please. Yeah, just kidding. And yeah, so that wraps up kind of my where we are and how we got here territory. There's only one note I have for you with regards to the agenda when we get there, and that's that I accidentally did not include this item in the council draft. So if this deliberation, or however you want to call it, if you want it to be on the next council meeting, I actually did not include it in the draft when I scheduled all this out in our planning schedule. So that's a note. I think if you want to have that meeting, I think you need to add it to the draft in your FNA. It should not be in there now. is what I'm
Was it the
saying.
administration's intent that it goes to council next meeting?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
intend to. I mistakenly left it off.
It's our intent to give you as many touches and opportunities to ask questions or touch it as possible.
And final, leave room for discussion. We have a lot of our CIP, instructors or reviewers, everyone who's been part of the process so far, and can answer questions about it. And so here for any of that, and everyone should be here ready to go.
Any questions, comments? So I'll give you the grumpy old man feedback. Okay. One, I'm having a hard time with the line of credit. I don't like the idea of pulling the Visa card out before the mortgage comes to pay for the kitchen remodel. Okay. Let's line of credit's a little higher interest rate than bond. I know we're trying to buy time, but if that time costs me money, I have concerns there. Okay. So you'll need to talk to me more on that. Two, the phasing as discussed in the last council, nicking a corner off the side is not phasing. All right, phase one was 14/15 of the overall project plan, and phase two was 1/15 of the project plan. If you do rough numbers a minute, that's not really a phasing plan, okay? In my opinion. Okay, so you got to look at that more or something, because that 1/15 is just will end up being a gimme. It goes away. It's a crumb not worth going back for. Okay. That was most of my concerns. Okay, I other than, we asked for additional partnership funding, and we've made no movement. We as council may need to step in more and help. I don't know. Mayor and I have been had conversations just before the past meeting about that. Okay. We got to close that gap somehow. Oh no, now you're gonna tell me I'm bad. I'm just mean.
I wanted to speak to your concern about the line of credit making it more expensive. Over the 6-year CIP, we saved $372,000 by doing a line of credit instead of just a straight up bond. And that's because we're borrowing in increments. We don't borrow that 5.2 million right away. If we just need $1 million for 2 months, we just borrow $1 million. So we're only paying interest on that. And then we save on the principal repayment for the bond that would have occurred during that period. Instead, we're paying at the end of the bond period, which is 20 years in the future. that principal payment is, you know, future value of money. It's going to be cheaper in 20 years, but over the life of the CIP that we're talking about, it is a savings to use the line. of credit.
Hang on.
Mhm.
Is the line of credit at a higher or lower interest rate than anticipated for bond?
It is at a higher rate of
At a
interest.
higher, so whatever we use that line of credit for will be at a higher cost of money than if we waited and just did it as part of the bond.
That is true.
Okay.
But if we did a bond, we would immediately have the total value of the bond that we would start paying interest on. And with the line of credit, we're able to incrementally walk into it as we use the funding. So even though the rate is higher, the amount that we pay in interest will end up to be lower.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's kind of like if you have a credit card, you don't automatically owe anything on it until you start using it. So you could go out and you could buy a trip to Paris. You could go out and you could buy a new car, and as soon as you swipe the card, then you have to start paying for that. Right, but with the bond, it would be that whole amount. You immediately are in debt for it.
And we're locked into the existing interest rate,
We're locked into the interest rate and the period of time.
Okay, that makes sense.
whereas hopefully it will drop.
I can take a swipe at the phasing discussion. The way the facility is designed and to try to accommodate the desires of the input that we receive from the public and everything else, that really is how we can split this project. That makes sense. You really can't pull that lobby, the new lobby out, because that ties the two buildings together and you're gonna need that space to access it. You can't pull the locker rooms out because they're required for the aquatics activity. You could take the pool out, but that kind of is what everybody really wants. And the other piece, the meeting room could be removed, but you'll be paying a lot more to add it later because of the way you'll be remodeling that section and changing walls from interior walls to exterior walls, etc. So a lot of attention and care went into that phasing discussion, and that is kind of how the cookie crumbled. The Y did work with us through that also, so that phasing also makes it a feasible design for their operations to meet their obligations under the existing and future operating agreement, where the city would not be required to add any capital for the operating and maintenance of the facility going into the future. So it wasn't just that we lopped the two rooms off the other end. There was a lot of thought and process, and I want to say 3 or 4 meetings that went into getting that right, so it would work and not kill the project.
Go ahead, Councilor Johnson.
Related to that, I had asked before about the idea of putting in whatever kind of footings are needed to add walls and a ceiling in the future, and if that could be a future phase. And that's just for the natorium, if that's the right word, natatorium. So the nativity, whatever it is. So you could have so you'd have the locker room, and you could have the lobby, all that stuff, be fully enclosed, walls, ceiling, and all that stuff. But then there'd be a big wall, or maybe 2 big walls, and a very high ceiling, probably. And if those could be added in later, if it could be designed in such a way. And
Only
that
if
could
the
save
code
costs.
doesn't change. So the building code gets updated
Mhm.
quite often.
Mhm.
And the one thing, there's 2 things that always change in the building code: seismic and ADA.
Mhm.
So if you spend that money putting in footings for hope of future construction, that clock is ticking, usually for a period of about 2 years, where you need to do that. Otherwise, you are at risk of, oh, they've decided that there's a new rebar pattern that you have to put in those footings, and you would be tearing those footings out and replace them with footings that meet the current code.
Maybe one more, then I get my turn. Go ahead.
If that's the difference between us getting the community center expansion and not getting it, I'm willing to take that risk.
It is a risk.
If that's the difference.
So can I get clarification? So what is it that where's the big wall? What are you
Well-
lapping off and putting footings in for?
Yeah, so what I'm imagining is, I don't have a picture in front of me, but what I'm remembering from the plan is that to the northern side is where the locker rooms are. And then there might have been like a storage facility that was kind of to the left of the drawings. We were doing the top-down view. And then to the south, I believe that that wall didn't have anything specific that was attached to it or necessary. Perfect, yeah. And then the ceiling that would go above the pool specifically.
So you still have the pool, but you wouldn't do the community
pool-
room and things like that. That's what you're saying.
The pool would basically be outside. Everything else would be enclosed though, was what I was thinking. It's not what I want. But again, if that's the difference between us being able to do this and not being able to, I'm willing to do it. Yeah. Perfect. So I'll point this for the cameras here. So I'm talking about this wall. So here's the pool over here, right? Talking about this wall over here, and then the ceiling up here.
So that whole, that solid section of that wall, if you look at the side, you can see all the windows.
Yeah.
That's what the pump room is, or the.
This part over here.
That section there, it's not
Okay.
storage. That's all the equipment to operate.
Okay, so it'd be this section with a bunch of windows.
That's pulled back.
So that could be like temporarily fenced in or something.
How would we?
You mean like
No,
outside,
that-
or I don't understand.
So this section right here with the wall of windows, I'm saying that just opens up to pool deck, correct? But there's nothing on the other side of those windows that's functional equipment or
pools.
something. Yeah, but like it's not equipment or something.
No.
Right. I mean, there are a bazillion outdoor
You want- you
pools
wanna chunk-
in the United
chunk
States.
That section out.
Right. I'm wondering if that could save any cost, and then kind of a similar thing with as much of the ceiling area up here as possible.
You mean lower the roof?
The whole roof up here,
Open it.
if we could go without it.
Oh,
Say, you
build an outdoor
Yeah.
pool.
Yes, that.
Oh, well, that's a whole different project. So,
okay. So, Mike, I'm gonna reflect back on your comments. I have no argument that we asked the community and our partners, do you like cake? And they all said, yes. Okay, but we've already got $15 million of city capital funds that are not being used for something else set aside for this. We are $5 million short of being able to close budget on this. So I'm asking, how much cake can you afford and what does it look like? Okay, and it's not knock off 1/15 of the project, whatever. The other part of the Y now supports our community center as is, and it's functional, and we're only adding to it. So if they have an opinion that they can't support this facility with an added pool, that's another whole discussion. We may need to open up discussions about partners. Okay, we need to work in collaboration with the Y, but they don't get to drive this. It's majority of this, minimum $15 million is city funding.
I understand,
So we get to make the decision of what this thing is.
and I'm sorry if you misinterpreted my words.
No, I'm reflecting some other comments too.
Okay,
Okay, not just yours.
the Y has not been driving this project. The city has been driving this project. They have they have provided valuable feedback, and they've been a great partner. We are in negotiations for the new operating agreement. We expect to see that soon. That's still to come. But what's been driving this design is the outreach that was completed and the public input, and it was prioritized based on that. I reflected on this yesterday, where this is my first time actually designing something where we started in Excel. we started with all that data that Una collected, and we weighted that data and prioritized that data on the activities that the public gave us. And once we had all those activities programmed, the program developed. And we also incorporated the WISE program and classes in there. Then they assigned, the nominal square footages that their industry has for that. And then we started designing the facility. So this facility is a result of what the public has told us they wanted. It's not what the Y wants. It's not what Mike wants. It's not what Jeff wants. It's not what Dylan wants. This is what the public told us they wanted. That was our assignment, and we did that. I understand we are short. Drew worked really hard to come up with a sustainable funding option that protects our purchasing authority right now, because I don't see the forecasting, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'll fully admit it if I am, and be quiet, but I don't see how we can generate savings to outweigh the increase in costs, in construction costs over the next little while. So whether we do the bond or whether we do a line of credit to close that gap, we support the line of credit because we believe there are more dollars available to us, especially once the program gets a go ahead. I believe that many people will be coming to join the program once it's a shovel in the ground project.
Okay, but let's make two distinctions. One, a bond line of credit is how you finance. It's not how you fund this thing.
Correct.
Okay, so there's a $5 million coming out of somewhere. It may be coming out of the future, but let's be aware, there are future projects that will not get done because we've taken this additional $5 million
Correct.
out. Okay. Two, I don't think you took into consideration that the public, by way of the council, has given you a design criteria that says, this is the money we got. What can you do? I haven't seen anything other than all up. So what can be done with the funding we got? And if that is infeasible, broach that up to feasible. But right now, all I've seen is full meal deal.
I mean, and
I would say we came forward with like 4 or 5 different options and showed them to you
Yes, there were four options and
And
we
we-
haven't discussed them since.
because it seemed like the marching orders were, we wanted the full meal deal. So that's what we took and we ran with it.
Wanted the full meal deal, wanted partnerships to come in to cover that cost. If the partnerships are not coming in and we can't close that hole, then again, that comes back to council. We either cough up another $5 million or we scale it back. And I
So-
just haven't seen what that scale back looks like.
because there's a cost associated to designing that scaled back. And the decision was made months ago to proceed with this design option. If we were only going to do, say, the single pool option, then we would have spent that money, but we didn't spend the money on both because there's considerable costs in developing these designs. And the direction from council at that time was develop this design.
Mike, if that were a true statement, those other 3 options were off the table and you would have never been able to do a phasing effort in any way. Okay. I can use that same argument to say phasing is infeasible.
Okay,
Okay, again, guys, I'm just, at least have to attempt to live within our budget.
and we have really tried. This is not the full meal deal that the decorative tiling behind in a lot of places was removed to save funds. The window treatments were changed for a less expensive option. What else? there was a ton of stuff.
What would happen if we took the lazy river out?
It was about a 500,000, wasn't it?
That's right.
I think it was about a 500,000 for the lazy river.
That's what I remember.
Okay, so the other options could be on the table.
But they'd have to go back through and redesign the entire thing now, because they'd showed it to us initially and it had shown, generally speaking, what they anticipated the general cost would be. And to go back through and redesign it now, after they've gone through and picked all of the finishes and done all of the drawings and all of that, I think is the issue. In the end for
I
significantly
mean,
more costs.
if that's the change that the council wishes, obviously we'll go make that happen, but there will be additional costs to make that change to the design at this point, and there'll also be additional savings to incorporate it because of that cost. And if the lazy river's a problem, we can get rid of it. That would be a minor change to the design.
I
We
just
wouldn't have
picked
to
one off
change
the
the
top of my
building.
head. Tell me what the other ones are. I don't know.
Well, single pool option, less lanes, you know, and as your pools get smaller, then your locker rooms can get smaller, and there's savings over there also. You know, the locker rooms are designed to accommodate the square footage of water that's designed. The equipment in the back rooms, if you only have one pool, then you only have one equipment. But when we ran all those different cost options, really the cheapest option was 23. And that was the single pool nuclear option. And that was 23 without tax.
And that was the box of water.
And that was a box of water inside a building.
Councilor Johnson.
Right. So remembering back to how I recall that staff got the direction from council to go for the quote unquote full meal deal
Sorry.
was something as follows. The current channel, as we're supposed to be calling it, that was say 500,000, right? Okay, so if we take that off, we're down to a $4.8 million line of credit. Does that really substantially change things? We're still looking at.
No, that may be a bad example. I don't know what the other options may be.
Think that was effectively it in that those smaller options. I think that what came from our survey data from the residents was that would not meet the needs of the public, and they start turning against the whole idea as a whole. And it starts to become less attractive to do it at all. It starts to become, well, why are we doing this if we're going to create something that it almost creates problems in terms of how scaled back it is, because there'd be so much fighting over it, people getting significantly more frustrated about not being able to get into programs for things that they're paying for, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how we arrived to the decision that the administration is referring to. That's my recollection.
Correct. Jeff has a slide that he put up that combined UNA's data with the colors and the different options we had in the past, and we went through that. And this is where our direction remained.
Good, Councilor.
Yeah, and then second on that was that the number that I had previously seen before the administration's proposed CIP, draft CIP, whatever you want to call it, was somewhere around 34 million. And that was something that was probably not likely to ever happen. So at some point between when I saw that a few months ago to now, the administration did do a fantastic job whittling it down by, I guess, somewhere around 5 million of a lot of bells and whistles. The pool deck itself, I believe, is going to have a more fancy material, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely don't want to minimize the efforts that the administration had, but just to kind of close this out here is it enough? And that's the big question before us. And that is a very hard pill to swallow, this idea that we would take out a line of credit rather than finding community partners. I shouldn't say rather than, that was a misstatement. With reference to the fact that we have not been successful in finding community partners yet. Better way to say it.
Good recovery on that.
We definitely have tried.
And I'll remind council that next year is the final round of aquatic grant funding that we were successful with.
Mhm.
And this time we will be applying without a competing project that they are already awarded a significant amount of money to. And we are putting the work in to have a successful event there, which will also lower that number. We search, I can tell you, I search regularly for additional grant opportunities, and other than about $15,000 here or there there really isn't.
No. I would also state the, so
You're
the Y has committed to, I think, 2.5 million. In addition, they're actually gonna buy all the soft costs. So it's 500,000 on top of it. So about $3 million. And that includes like all the lane lines and I can't remember everything, all the
Chairs,
furniture,
office furniture, TVs.
all the stuff. So that's on top of that, but
Sorry, I said I was gonna
Go
shut
ahead,
up.
Karis, I promised her she was next.
It's okay. You can go.
One
Okay.
last,
Her call.
the mayor and I have not given up finding local partners, and we are working hard to that
Right.
respect.
and we can use your help with the legislatures
Agreed.
and our partners. I met with one today. And I have been meeting with a different one that we're still hoping to get funding from. So,
Well, I also have concerns about taking on debt for the project. I do think that the line of credit that they're proposing is the best option that we can do in the event that we aren't able to find funding in an additional or alternative way. Obviously, we need to have a funding plan going forward to make sure that we've got the funds to complete the project, but I do think that significant cuts, I know for a fact that significant cuts have been made to make this a cheap, not cheap, but a cost-effective project, while also keeping in mind that there are some things that can't be cut and some finishes that we need to have in order to make sure that the building lasts and that the public is getting what they need out of the project. Going back to when Councilmember Johnson was speaking, and we did look at, whether it would make sense to have like a 4-lane pool or to remove some of the others, but then you end up in a situation where we end up not having a pool where the high school can have their swim meets, or you have, if you have one tank of water where it's either too hot for the athletes or too cold to have swim lessons. And then we end up in a situation where, again, nobody's getting all of their needs met. And so while this is quite expensive, and we have to figure out if there is a path forward, I do think that we're in the best situation we can with what has been proposed so far. Even though it's not ideal.
Well, no, I mean, no solution is perfect.
Yeah.
Councilman Johnson.
Got a few more here. I wanted to make sure that I had at least some understanding here of how the process goes for actually paying for this. So I'd assume that a contract would be awarded to somebody to actually build. And at what point do we start making payments? Do we say, okay, it was the 29 million, cool, here you go, here's the check? Or is it they build it and then we pay? Or is it that there's some along the way? In which case I'm wondering, do we have to start with the line of credit right now? Or do we just have to say, okay, if it comes to that, we would take a line of credit?
So the next step, assuming, or if, big if, Albert, use your big if the council said proceed, I've heard the CIP and it was there, we bring an item forward to request permission to proceed with the project. If the council said to proceed with the project, at that point, the next step is to get the guaranteed maximum price. You will know what the price is before you say yes. When you say yes, that's the maximum it can be. There will be progress payments made along the way as work occurs. We have significant capital on hand to do how many? At least a year's worth of work before we would be accessing any additional funds to move forward. And the price you have is as close to the guaranteed maximum price as we can get without saying go.
Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
And then, how long could we stave it off? Getting the guaranteed maximum price. And the reason I ask is that I believe that once we get it, there's a clock that starts. And we essentially have to agree or not agree. And if we disagree or we don't agree to do it, then start renegotiating and we start having problems.
It's not so much that cost clock starts,
Mhm.
it's an instantaneous price. You know, you got about 30 days to get through our process to approve that price. It's not a price that's gonna hold for a year. It's not a price that's gonna hold for 6 months. It's not a price that's gonna hold for 3 months. As far as whenever we ask for it, we could ask for it whenever, but that's not, you know, as time goes on, things are getting more expensive.
Follow up?
Good.
Yeah, so I hear that. What I'm wondering is, could we try to get that King County Aquatics grant before we ask for the guaranteed maximum price?
If we delay the project a year. Because the King County, we would not know till September
It would be
of
September.
26.
Do you have 20,
25.
25, right?
25.
Okay, so that makes me feel a little bit better.
25, on whether or not we're successful.
The paddles are right there on the
So-
wall.
So it would be about a 14, 15-month delay.
Mhm.
And I don't know, what's the cost increase per month?
5%.
Per month or total? Total. So that would be an additional 4 or 5%. So the question is are we gonna get a grant money to offset that 4 or 5%? And what did we do? We just moved the football down the field to do the same decision.
Yeah, we saw the same cap.
Go ahead, Mayor.
So isn't the pricing right now through beginning of July and then there's escalators? Is that right?
I think it's through August.
Through August or through July?
We need a decision in July.
So-
but yeah.
One of the reasons why we can't get guaranteed maximum price yet, because we haven't made a commitment and we haven't signed the phase two agreement. What's called the phase two agreement, the second phase, a second portion of the agreement to start the clock. Guaranteed maximum price depends partially on what time of year they start work. Right? So if we start work this summer, then they can accomplish a certain amount of site work and demolition and such and get pricing. They can't get firm commitment on pricing yet because there is no commitment from us to move forward with the project. So what pricing is demonstrated in the estimates that we've seen now are based on what they think it's going to be. And all of their suppliers, material men and subs are giving a price based on what they think it's going to be without any commitment. Once there is a commitment, then they will sharpen their pencils, look at the timeline, look at the construction start period, look at their lead times on equipment, and then they will give a better, probably a little better price. And then the guaranteed maximum price is just that. It's a guaranteed maximum. It cannot be more, but it could and likely would be less.
Well, so this is not necessarily a firm fixed price.
Nope.
This is,
It's a guaranteed maximum
it's
price.
a guarantee, well, let me get it back in different terms though.
Mhm.
Is this cost of material plus margin?
Yes,
with
it's like a
with
cost
not
plus.
to exceed?
Yep.
Go ahead.
And then just to clarify, the only way that the price could increase once we've had the guaranteed maximum price is if we asked for something extra.
Or
So it
changed.
could be more, but it would have to be done at our request.
Or some unforeseen condition that is outside the bounds of the contract language, which is, I've never seen it happen.
It would be like some kind of a weird,
It could happen if we change the scope.
Yeah.
And that has happened.
okay.
Or like the school, they find a sewer line we didn't know about when they get into it. Like, oh, got Mayor.
So what if it comes in under, do we pay the lower price or we always pay that maximum price that they quoted?
It's cost
We just-
plus, so it,
Cost plus.
yeah.
Okay.
What you actually play is cost plus
Mhm.
labor material. I assume there's some margin in there.
Yeah.
But there's a not to exceed, which is a guaranteed maximum price. That even if it goes beyond, your costs go beyond that, they're locked in at that.
Right. Part of their bid was to give their cost, their profit, which was 3.58%. But that's on top of everything, right? So all of the costs, that includes all the subs and all the materials, everything in, which they show us the work. I mean, we get all of those receipts. And then on top of all that, then they put their 3.58%.
Okay, that's the margin. All right,
That's their margin, yeah.
go ahead, Councilor.
So if this comes in, say 1 million under, and we get the King County Aquatics grant, then there's no line of credit. At least you wouldn't draw for it. Maybe we could have a line of credit, but
It's been great.
Yeah.
You're welcome, Drew.
No, I think council's really seeing kind of the administration's strategy when it comes to this in order to try to get down that bond size over time. As it's been stated, we're really hoping for that King County Aquatics grant to come through for us, but there are other potential sources to help us reduce that line of credit over time, right? So as council knows, there's certain grants attached to some of the other projects that we have overall. What happens if those grants don't necessarily come through for those projects? Would that free up some potential cash to then reduce the line of credit over time? So there's different options in play in addition to other partners funding it. And obviously we'd want more partners as a part of this process. But ideally the goal is to try to lock in that price right now, kind of as we're speaking, so that we don't see those escalations over time. At the time that we're giving us enough room in order to help drive down that interest rate, right, over time that might come with the 20-year bond, but then at the same time, open us up to additional partner discussions and so on that could be happening over the next year, year and a half or so. So I would hope to push out that line of credit as much as I possibly can, right? Which means cash flow is going to be really critical. So Janice certainly knows back there that making sure that we have a sense of what the burn rate is and how much we're spending on a pretty consistent basis. And when we might find that is making sure that we're as efficient as possible with that cash flow over time to help us to push out that line of credit as much as we possibly can, and ideally see those interest rates drop over time, and then find those funding partners in between. And as Mike stated, the King County Aquatics grant, SiView certainly had that for $4 million. Unfortunately, they were not able to get their project across the line. This is the only viable facility now in the Upper Valley, right? For a aquatics facility and an expanded community center at this point. So with that said, we think that we'll certainly receive support from King County to move forward. Well, I saw.
Don't assume SiView has given up. That's my only. So.
So anyway, with that said, we are hopeful that indeed King County will give us something for the most part. So,
Agree.
but that's the administration's strategy, and that's what we're proposing as part of the CIP in order to get this project across the line.
Councilman Christensen.
Oh, I was just gonna say, with SiView though, they didn't have the 6-lane pool in the phase that they went forward to the voters with as well, whereas we do have the 6-lane pool as well as the activity pool. Theirs was a much smaller portion. It wouldn't have served the needs of the entire community as written.
got two more big ones, if you'll entertain me.
Go for it.
All right. First one of these is, I want to make sure that I understood our current investment into this project is, it was something like 2 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Our current
Yes.
investment, right?
0.95 million.
Okay, there you go. And that money, I think, came from a grant. Am I remembering that correctly?
$1 million grant
Okay,
from the
1
aquatics
million
grant.
came from a grant.
Only half, right?
Yeah, we were
It's
only,
only 500,000 from
I think
that.
we're using 600.
Or 600,000, sorry.
Okay, and then the rest came from, what was the source for the rest?
The capital improvement.
Okay, so that was from the CIP. So that 600,000 or so, had we not spent that, what would have happened to that money? If we hadn't done this design build process, or at least if we hadn't used that grant for that, what would have happened to those dollars by this point?
Nothing. That grant, that money would still be laying out there for construction, if we had
Okay.
targeted it for construction.
Okay, but it didn't, does it have an expiration date to when we would have had to have turned it back?
It does, but it's quite a ways out
5
there.
years or
If we were
Oh.
not making progress on the pool and after 3 or 4 years, they would say, hey, are you gonna build this?
We would have to give it back.
Eventually.
million.
They would want it back.
Okay, so that just helps you understand a little bit about where our investment is currently. Okay, the other thing was, I looked back at our last CIP and let me pull it up here. So I've got the numbers right in front of me. Right. So what we were anticipating for the funding from sales tax and REIT was around 7.5 million from each. And in the new one, it is about rounded off to about 10 million each. So that's a substantial increase in that. So that's 3 million for each of those for a total of $6 million increase. And that's after just 2 years. That last CIP was 2022. So does that mean that by 2026, we're looking at another 6 million from those sources? Or why is there that substantial increase? I did want to hypothesize, and you correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I do recall that in the past, council members have been concerned about the estimates moving forward for REIT especially as being somewhat conservative and a desire for there to be something that's a little bit more accurate, given that that's always been estimated much lower than what actually came in. And that I was wondering if that was factored in, not you, different council members.
No, but I would counter, and we had that discussion in Public Works just before this, and have asked for some data, but I would concur with the recollection that our estimates are usually pretty good. We did snap the line and did some inflation escalation on the projects in, was it just this last one?
Yeah.
This last one, okay. So
10.5, right?
yeah, I can't remember. But I would also, and yeah, in your presentation you saw last Monday, Drew did show a re-estimate of revenues from one-time revenues, and there was about a $2 million in there. Just rough math I did while watching YouTube. But also be careful that the project, all these project costs, CIP project costs, are going to escalate according to inflation, as well as your revenue is going to escalate toward inflation. So be careful that you're not spending money you don't have, because both those equations equal out. But I think he got up here to say something.
Just, yeah, why was it 7 and now it's 10?
Yeah, a big one being a refinement of those costs or the revenues we have that go into our restricted funds, right? So we can only pay for the community center from certain funds within the non-utility. And so when we look at those, we have different revenues. We prioritize how we utilize those revenues. We have a list of projects. In addition to that, there is some projects that their timing changed and that freed up opportunity. For example, Sandy Cove is not in this list anymore, and it was in the one that was before. So there's projects that have changed their timing, changed how much money they cost, or no longer live on the list. All that combines to give you that difference. So lots of moving targets have actually kind of got us here. It's all we look at the entire list of to-dos, and we look at our entire list of money that we expect to come in for the next biennium. And then we try to make that match very closely, because that's real money that we're talking about. And then we try to make sure that our 6-year plan works too. And sometimes we're crossing those lines, but essentially what happens is if the items that are in our to-do list change in size, scope, scale, or timing, that frees up that money to be used somehow differently. And then, again, with all those other little caveats that there's restricted use funds like transportation's in that non-utility CIP. I'm not talking about those things, just that list.
Because we're just.
Okay, so then if I could just say back to you what I thought I heard. And then you could correct me what I got wrong. So the idea is that it's not that we have actually increased how much substantially that we are going to be taking in. Is in part a restructuring of what's in the CIP, and that increase is in part a decrease in expenditure elsewhere. And then we to the other part where I was speculating a little bit, it's not that we have changed our forecasting metrics for how we forecast REIT and sales tax. Is that correct?
Yeah, we haven't changed our forecasting methods at all, basically, when it
From
comes to that.
2022.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
I mean, as Dylan suggested, projects that are completed, for example, may not have cost as much as we had anticipated, right? And so there are additional grant sources that we received as well that could then offset some of those expected revenues that we're if the city was going to contribute to certain projects, that all kind of helped to increase the balance kind of moving forward. In addition, one of the things that we've experienced pretty substantially this past year was interest. One of the things that you're not actually seeing as a part of your revenue, right, picture is the amount of interest that we might anticipate generated over time as well, because it is very hard to forecast for us overall when it comes to that. But that was pretty substantial this past year because all that money that we have in this fund has been reinvested, U.S. Treasuries and other bonds, right, for example, in order for us to generate a return off that. So it's a lot of not necessarily, they're medium-sized things have been kind of adding up over time to get us to $10 million a piece of REIT plus non-reoccurring sales tax.
So we didn't go from being perhaps too conservative or not to being too optimistic. That's not a part of it.
Probability, maybe, 5% or 10% at most, maybe for that adaptation necessarily, but the other 90% is primarily what we've kind of stated between both of us.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm just looking for hands. That's
Oh,
all. I wanted to make sure that I was looking that way too. Sorry to put you on the spot there. All right,
Actually,
go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
I know
I
I've
was
been
waiting
talking a
for
lot. Then I seem to see that there's more than one project on the CIP. Are we just like good with the rest, or is administration looking for feedback on those as well, or kind of where are we at on everything else?
That was a lot to unravel. When you say there's only one project, you mean,
There's more
I
than
said,
one.
I said there's not one project.
oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yes, we're looking for feedback on all.
Okay. I yield the floor.
Were you gonna give some of that feedback? You brought it up. Are there questions, comment on other projects within the CIP or?
Yeah, I do have one thing, which is about the line of credit, which is not only for the community center expansion. There are the other projects as well that were intended to be covered by that. And do those have the same kind of hope that costs could come down? There could be other funding sources that could come in, or are those realistic hopes? Or is that line of credit really probably going to be a bond at some point?
There's 4 total projects that utilize bond.
Yes, the line of credit is just specifically for the community center. The other projects would not be bonded for until that date in which we specified in the CIP, so roughly 2026 or so for the most part.
Okay.
So those would get automatically added to the bond, but indeed during that time, we could also have potentially a line of credit. A line of credit is just a really short-term financing kind of method, maybe a year or 2 years, in which if you need to draw upon the cash, you certainly can, but then you roll it into something longer term, I think overall. So what we've got in here for those projects is just specifically a bond, but indeed we could add that to a line of credit or something in the future as well. But we've just kind of simplified it for this prospective. But yes, it does include 4 projects: the community center, the River Trail project, Arboretum, and then Town Center Phase 3, the transportation project over there, as well as the Meadowbrook Bridge Restoration Project. So those are your 4 projects as part of that bond in total that you see for 2026 in that row.
Councilman Johnson?
And the Meadowbrook Bridge restoration, that is structural, not just cosmetic. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Yeah.
And I should note that we are counting on grant funding for, I think, all of those projects.
No on Meadowbrook Bridge, yes on everything else.
Meadowbrook
And that
Bridge,
is included
Meadowbrook,
in, yeah, so
the
if you were to
full
go look at the
replacement.
other 3.
Yeah. Right now, for Meadowbrook Bridge, right now, we are funding in the CIP for the structural fixes, the painting, and maybe the pier, whatever upgrades we need to do to the piers, right? But it's anticipated moving forward that with the mill site development and higher potential for grant funding in the future, that we would replace that bridge because it is essentially approaching functional obsolescence, single lane bridge, that we would replace that bridge primarily with grant funding. So buying time right now may get us closer to that goal rather than spending a whole bunch of money now and then trying to replace it, shortly thereafter, after we've already spent $2.5 million on it.
And so to clarify from what I think is another, maybe a potential question you're about to ask, the other projects rely on a combination of city funding bond, which could be however you want to constrain that, and then it does assume grant funding for some of them. There's really likely grants for a lot of those projects, Riverwalk, Arboretum. That's a very likely grant project for us. But the restoration work on Meadow Bridge, not so much. Building a brand new bridge, more so. And so what we've done is we've tried to package each project with what we anticipate is the most likely outcomes. So we didn't put a huge percentage of grants on projects that will never get them, because then they'll just be sitting on our CIP, wasting space a bit when we could have been prioritizing them properly. So yeah, they do represent the kind of like the package that we likely think we're going to get out of it.
But the short answer to the question is wherever you can go get grants, you guys are trying to get
That's absolutely right.
them.
That's right.
Right, and the intent next steps of this are,
So the two, independent of the two in the open house, but in terms of coming to council next, we would like to bring another deliberation opportunity to council at the next council meeting. And then we intend to also bring another, we'll call it the final review, but that's up to you all, to review both the community center and the non-utility CIP to the next Public Works Committee, FNA combo, and then to the next council meeting with
On the
final
24th.
adoption, right?
The 24th, right?
I believe the
Yeah,
24th.
the 24th.
Yep, so I think it's the 10th and the 24th. We'd like to be at both.
any other questions or comments? You want to hold them until
No,
council next meeting? Okay. Thank you, that was fun. All right, with that, the rest of it is, other items are upcoming discussions, information only for this time. And we'll go into draft of city council agenda, unless there are any objections to doing that. Hearing none, we'll move in. All right, proposal is for a roundtable at 5:30. Oh, this is for the WCIA training, all right. And regular meeting starting at 7. Call to order, pledge of allegiance, agenda approval, public hearings. Didn't we have at least one public hearing ready to go? It'd be the next, not this one, next one, all right. Any appointments, community van program? Okay, which I have participated in the past. Public comments, requests for items not on the agenda, then we'll move into a consent. We have approval of council minutes updated May 28th, approval of claims report. I believe you can also take up there were 2 items. A resolution awarding the public works contract to Puget Sound Paving Construction for road maintenance. What was the other one? Ethan, do you remember?
Construction management.
Oh, okay. Agenda Bill 24066, Amendment number 2, Consultant Services Agreement with OTEC for the design of Kimball Creek Bridges Restoration Project.
I believe the fireworks stand also
Yep.
by public safety.
Okay. Oh, where'd that guy go?
Yeah.
Okay, but currently, at least the version I'm looking at does not have the demolition of the White House. Excuse me for using that term.
There's a movie about that.
See if you guys listening, it's a different building.
It's a different building, different Washington altogether.
The public safety is supposed to be up there too.
All right. Yeah, and we'll move also Agenda Bill 24059, approval fireworks stand permit. Move that into consent. Let me go get that other agenda bill. Which one was that? Agenda Bill 24060, demolition and removal of residents 7702 Railroad Avenue Southeast. That one also can be on the consent agenda. And the other one with the OTAC was the Agenda Bill 24066, can be on the consent agenda.
Do you want to put the pavement? I don't think so. I think it was. the
Okay,
paving one.
strike that. 066 is not on the consent.
6.9 and 6.6 were not.
With that, let's move on to the rest of them. We have no ordinances at this stage. We'll move to committee reports. Public safety will not have a report as fireworks stands. Well, doesn't have a standing item for report. Fireworks stand will be moved up under consent. Community development has no agenda bills. Public Works will have Agenda Bill 24069 for the Kimball Creek Bridges, 066 for OTAC will be on there. And then we'll have opportunity 0672 for discussion of the 6-year transportation. And then Agenda Bill 2407 goes on consent for the pavement and striping.
I'd just love to ask for mercy right now because one of the items that you do not see up there is the financial management policy. I'd love to add it to the finance administration.
Oh, man.
On consent if you prefer, but
Interesting
I
question.
think you need to ask for mercy over there.
Okay, so that will be what's the agenda bill on that one? Make me lose my place. Oh, that would be agenda bill 24079.
074.
074, sorry. Let's put that under F and A. I just, even if we say nothing, I don't like the optics of having the management policies under consent.
Yes, Johnson. Yeah, I would almost wonder if we could just request staff to do almost like a 1 slider or 2 slider that just says, here are the big changes. Just
Well,
a
I
short summary as a presentation of,
think they've got that. If you look, the analysis section pretty well goes through each section and kind of the bullet list of what changes are in that section.
I mean, like during the meeting, I would like for them to get up and just have it on the video of, here's the big changes.
You want the same presentation from today with the slides or?
It could even be shorter.
Drew, if you could get up and just run through the analysis section on the agenda bill. Yeah, Okay.
I just like the public to have the opportunity to see it in there.
All right. Let me get back down to, so we'll put that under F and A.
Was there anything else on there?
Sorry, I'm bouncing around here getting public safety, that was that. So F and A committee, do we have anything for committee of the whole?
CIP. Needs to be added.
Liberation of CIP.
Yeah, so why don't we add the CIP discussion to committee of the whole? All right, you guys. All right, so
Yeah,
CIP
yeah, we're
discussion
fine.
is part of the committee of the whole?
Right.
All right, with that, we'll move into report, mayor's reports, commission liaison, department reports, executive session. I do have a request that we have an executive session. further discussion on council staff communications. Let's call it, I'm gonna be vague like that as appropriate for executive session.
But to get the example to the city attorney to see if
Okay.
it applies.
All right, and we'll talk after, and then we'll move to adjournment. Any other additions, revisions? Oh, I gotta hand it back. Yay. Sweet.
Excellent.
All right, so noted. Please put that on the agenda. All right, any other additions? Committee, you're good with it as we discussed?
Let's put that before the community band program.
All right, if there are no other objections, we'll take that as the agenda for next week. All right, with that, I think I'm at my favorite part of the agenda. Yes, we are. Any objections to adjournment? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all.